majesty. What is that? What is that conveying? What concept is that conveying? What's that, Leah? Royalty. Okay. So he has a bunch of royal robes on. Is that what it's trying to say?
Majestic.
He's majestic. The Bible talks about how majestic is his name, right? What is this majesty? Why is it important for us to know?
Because he's the ruler of the universe.
Okay.
When Isaiah saw him, the voice, the doors of the temple was shaking and trembling, and Isaiah was falling on his face. The majesty of the Lord overwhelmed him.
The definition for majesty is regal, lofty, stately dignity, imposing character, grandeur, supreme greatness or authority, sovereignty. A title used when speaking of or to a sovereign, usually preceding his name. Like, for example, you hear people refer to the King of England as Your Majesty. Why is the Bible conveying this concept? What is important for us to understand? The fact that God is clothed or robed in majesty. He's enveloped in it. Yes?
I think it has something to do with his laws, too.
With what?
His laws.
With his laws.
Rulership, laws, order.
Okay. Any other thoughts? I have the sense that the Bible is trying to convey to us that God is in control. Like, we're not just subject to him because he is the king, or because we owe him homage, or because it's due to him from us because he is the creator of all things. He literally sustains all life, right? The worlds follow the paths that they follow because of him. Even science, I don't know if you guys have recently heard, but there was this concept for a long time in the science community that the dark matter existed, and that's was probably what was holding all these celestial bodies in place to follow the courses that they were following. In other words, if dark matter didn't exist, the gravitational pull from each of the individual bodies in the solar system wouldn't be enough to hold it together, and the solar system would literally fly apart. Not just our solar system, but the universe in general. And so they started postulating, well, what is it that's keeping these planets in order, that they're flying the paths that they're flying? Because there's not enough gravitational pull from what we see out there to hold it all together. And so they came up with this concept of dark matter. There must be something that we don't see that's exerting gravitational influence upon these bodies that's holding the whole thing together, right? And what's even worse was that they began to measure, I don't know if you guys know this, but the universe itself is spreading apart. It's flying away from the original, what they consider to be the Big Bang, in a sense. So if you will, the universe is expanding. But what they can't figure out is why the universe is accelerating in its expansion. Think of it this way. Let's say you have an object in space, let's say a ball and a bomb. And they're next door to one another in space, and the bomb goes off. And when the bomb goes off, it propels the ball in a particular direction, okay? And remember that in space, there's no resistance, right? It just goes and it keeps going, and there's nothing that's going to stop it except some kind of gravitational pull or some kind of friction. But in space, there is no friction. So when something gets propelled in a certain direction, it continues to go in that same direction without any acceleration or deceleration, right? So imagine the Big Bang. The Big Bang goes off. Everything flies apart at a certain rate of speed, so to speak. Makes sense, doesn't it? Sort of, scientifically. The problem is that you would expect that those things flying away from the Big Bang would continue to go at whatever speed that they were propelled at originally, right?
No propulsion, so
They have no propulsion. There's no rocket engine on them that's causing them to accelerate, but they are accelerating. And the question is why? You ever read the psalmist talks about that God stretches out the heavens? God is holding it all together. He's making it all go at the rate that it's going. And scientists look at it and they say, it's unexplainable. We can't figure it out. How is it possible that this could be happening? Science cannot define it. And yet it is. So when we start talking about the majesty of God, we need to ask ourselves, what is that majesty? It's the majesty that controls all things. You heard me mention in the last sermon that I gave that when Gabriel approached the earth at the resurrection, Ellen White says that the very atoms became excited. Imagine the basis, the very little tiny things that hold all of us together begin to vibrate and clap in excitement that Jesus was about to be raised from the dead. That as he approached the earth, they began to shudder in fear. The earth trembled. Why? Because the majesty of heaven sent him to do a special work. And the very elements know this, but for whatever reason, we don't. The very things that hold you together are aware of his majesty. But for some God-forsaken reason, we as human beings can't figure this out. How is that possible? So, David's trying to get across here. The Lord reigns. He's in control. He owns everything and it all obeys him. He's clothed in majesty. The very elements know this, and you should too. He is armed with strength. Why does the Bible say he's armed with strength? It makes it sound as though he's, you think of it like a gunslinger, right? He's armed. Uh-oh, we better be careful. Mark your words carefully, right? Because he's armed. But God is armed with strength. Indeed, the world is established firm and secure. Now, I don't know about you, but when I read the news, I don't get the impression that the world is very secure. I don't get the impression that it's firmly established and being orderly. Can you say that, Lay? Orderly.
Because it's in rebellion to the order of God. That's why.
But what does it mean then that the world is firmly established? Like it's established firm and secure.
Maybe the earth.
Remember that the majesty that's talked about here is armed with strength, and he's sovereign, right? We just read that this concept of him reigning, this concept of majesty, talks about the sovereignty of God. In other words, everything obeys him. He's sovereign. Is it possible that even in the mess of everything that's going on, and all the influences of the evil one, all the recklessness of human beings, that in the midst of all of that, his purposes are secure and firm? He's sovereign.
The enemy can do nothing except having permission from God, just like Jesus said, Satan has asked permission to sift you, Peter. He can't do anything without getting permission from God. Nothing that comes to us is without God's permission.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
We're seen.
We're secure in what?
Seen.
In the midst of sin, we're secure. I was just telling David this morning on the way into church that since I went on vacation in December, I've been on this roller coaster with my dad. And there's a good part of the equation where I'm having to be there essentially to feed him, to put his clothes on, take his clothes off, get in the shower, get out of the shower, go to the toilet, go back to bed. It's a nonstop patrol, if you will. When he gets up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, he yells, "Randall," and bounce out of bed 3 or 4 times a night, and still have to be to work at 8 o'clock in the morning. And there's a part of me that feels overwhelmed and exhausted, and I now wonder, how long can I do this? And I keep saying to God, just get me through. I realize that in the midst of this chaos that seems to be going on, bouncing in and out of the hospital, trying to get on flights to get him home, in the midst of all this chaos, there's been a constant strength that has been with me and has helped me to get over the next step, over the next hurdle. And in a sense, I see in that what the psalmist is talking about here. Because in the midst of the storm, there's still this firm and secure majesty that is in control. My job is just simply to submit to it. I mean, the trials come in waves, right? And my job is to just say, Lord, keep me firm, keep me secure. I want to be able to continue to be a servant here. And I realize that it's in a sense, it's a training exercise. God knows there's a storm coming. And these trials are designed, in a sense, to bring about the development of character, a continual submission, a continual servant attitude. And I think, there was a moment last week. I was putting a pair of underwear on my dad. He can't reach down to the end of his feet to get them on. And he shook his head and he said, "I never thought that you would have to do this for me." And of course, I think back to when I was a kid, when he was doing it for me. And I think to myself, we've come full circle. All that he sacrificed for me when I was a kid, I'm now having the opportunity to sacrifice for him. And he said to me, "I'm really, really, really proud of you." And that meant more to me than I think anything he's ever said to me. In the midst of the waves, just when you think that you are going to get clocked by the next big wave and that it's going to be too much, God steps in with his majesty and keeps you secure and firm. That's the God that we have. You might think everything is out of control, but he's sovereign. All right. The lesson opens with this: the Psalms unswervingly uphold the foundational belief in God's sovereign reign. The Lord created and sustains everything that he has created. He is the sovereign king over the whole world, and he rules the world with justice and righteousness. His laws and statutes are good and bring life to those who keep them. The Lord is a just judge who ensures that the world remains well ordered, and he does so by rewarding the righteous and punishing the wicked, but in his time, not ours. When it says the Lord is a just judge who ensures that the world remains well ordered, you have to ask yourself, you have to scratch your head. At least I scratched my head. Because I look out there and I see the things that seem to me to be completely unjust in every way. Slavery. Do you know that there are more slaves in the world today? I think it's 4 or 5 times more than back during the time of slavery in the United States and Europe. There are more people that are enslaved today than ever before in the history of the world. There are more women that are being exploited, probably today than ever in the history of the world. When you look at the world, I don't know about you, but I see chaos. I don't see a well-ordered earth. When I think that there's a judge who is supposed to be ensuring that the world remains well-ordered, I think to myself, there's something wrong with this judge. He's not exacting justice as he should.
In his time, not ours, like the lesson said.
In his time, not ours. What does that mean then? Are we to look at the world and know that he is sovereign? Got to remember that he's sovereign. And we have to make sure we understand what that means. Nothing happens without his permission. As you mentioned, nothing happens without his permission. So the question then becomes, if nothing happens without his permission, is he then responsible for what's happening?
He takes responsibility, even though he's not responsible. I mean, he allowed sin to take place. He didn't snuff it out immediately. So he takes responsibility for it.
Yep.
But he sees the end from the beginning and we don't. So we may be confused and not understand it, but he sees the end from the beginning.
Well, he gives us free will, and that's the big struggle between his sovereignty and our free will. He does not stop us from exercising our free will. He allows us to do that. So we cause all kinds of trouble.
Okay.
There's a verse in the Bible that says, because judgment is not executed immediately, because of that, the wicked people become stronger. So
Okay.
people think if judgment doesn't immediately follow, then it's all right to do it, and they get worse and worse and worse in what they're doing until finally,
Paula?
I believe that Ellen White said that even the angels didn't fully understand where Lucifer was coming from. And so he lets them play out his hand, and then it becomes obvious to all the intelligence of the universe what this is. And so that when he destroys it completely forever, there will be no question.
But in the meantime, there's a lot of collateral damage.
He says he will wipe away every tear.
I'm sorry?
He says he will wipe away every tear.
David?
Yeah, like Revelation 14 says, just before Jesus comes, it says, the harvest of the earth is ripe. That means wickedness, the grapes it's talking about, the wickedness is run full course. Everybody can see clearly what it is. And it says the grain is also ripe. So righteousness has gone full course, and there's full righteousness and full wickedness, and it's on display before the whole world and the universe.
All right. Did God design it this way, in a sense? I'm asking the really tough questions this morning. Have you noticed?
He knew sin would exist, and he didn't stop
He knew sin would exist, and he didn't stop it.
but it is interesting that in the end, the righteous will fully represent Jesus. And that is a marvel to the whole universe.
Yes.
And
Okay.
that's why some people who say, oh, we cannot be perfect and all that. No, it says that in the end, they will be fully reflecting Jesus.
The mystery of God will be completed. That's
Okay.
the sermon.
Okay. Any other thoughts on this?
I think one reason why he's letting it go on so long is because he knows that there are still people here who, if they get the right chance, will believe in him. So he's given them time to make that decision, to
Yeah.
find him.
Yeah, back to the parable of the sower that David mentioned, right? The servants offered to go out and pull out all the weeds, right? But he said, no, don't do that, because you might end up pulling out some of the righteous. So really what we're talking about is, if I were to approach the weed patch and I see, yeah, there's a couple good plants in there, but there's a lot of weeds. And so I start pulling. I might mistake one that maybe isn't looking so much like a plant, but actually is. And it makes you wonder then, okay, is it possible that some of these plants start off looking like weeds, but ultimately grow up to be productive plants, right? I think I've had a few times in my life where I may not have looked so much like a plant and a little more like a weed, right?
It's a good thing someone didn't try to pluck you out.
Exactly. So this time is really important. It's important for us to understand that we all need that probationary time. Each one of us are on probation in a sense. But back to, let me call your attention to Isaiah 45:7. Isaiah 45:7 reads, I form light, this is God speaking, I form light and create darkness. If God is light, why did he create darkness? If he wants light, if he wants us to exist in the light, why did he create darkness?
Darkness is the absence of light. So you can't have light and have any obstacles without having darkness behind it, right?
Yeah, like you wouldn't see stars if there was nothing but light in the sky, right? You wouldn't appreciate them at all, right? I don't know that you would appreciate light at all either if you didn't know there was darkness or hadn't experienced it.
And this, I believe, has in my mind, this is why it makes sense for God allowing sin to exist. You couldn't appreciate the character of God until he had this controversy on his hands, and you see how he responded to the controversy. It revealed his love in a way that was impossible for it to be revealed if there was not the conflict.
Yeah. And the option of free will.
Son. I mean, the angels knew he was loved, but they didn't know what love entailed until they saw him sacrificing part of himself to save people who rejected and rebelled against him.
Okay. So, but let's come back to the light and darkness contrast, because I think it's important that we understand that God created both. And Isaiah 45 here is being really clear. He formed the light, but created the darkness. He says, I make peace and created evil. Did God create evil?
Or is that just the natural reaction to forming the light and making peace?
Yes. So, I mean, he's using an analogy here. You're not going to appreciate light unless there's darkness, right? And you're not going to appreciate peace until you've experienced evil, right?
I have a question. You know, thinking about the new earth and heavens and all that, isn't there going to be no darkness then?
Yeah.
So, I mean, in our sinful condition, I would say these parameters are true, that we can't appreciate the light as well without the darkness. But, I mean, in heaven and the new earth and all that, there's not going to be darkness, and there's only going to be goodness, and, you know, it's not going to be sin. So, you know, it's going to be a different thing then.
Yeah. Okay. Paula?
The controversy is over the character of God. And the greatest revelation of God is the cross.
I'm sorry, I can't quite hear you.
I said the controversy was over the character of God. And the greatest revelation of God is at the cross.
Yes.
If Jesus never had to come to the cross, we would not have had the beauty of knowing the depth of his love.
Mm-hmm. So when we look at the cross as another great analogy, right? The darkness of the cross. We see all the ugliness that went on there. The fact that in the midst of that, Jesus was pouring out his love to humanity is really what makes us appreciate it so very much, right? He was willing to go to that depth in order to save you and me. So there is this concept of opposing elements in a sense, right? The light and the darkness, the love and evil, right? Peace and evil. We have to understand that there are the two extremes, And God is trying to communicate, I think, in a sense, that we have to kind of understand a little bit about evil. Now, if you go all the way back to Eden and you see the conversation between Satan and Eve, you remember that Satan always mixes a little bit of truth with the lie, right? But he said to her, if you eat of this apple, or whatever the fruit was, hopefully it wasn't an apple, you'll know both good and evil. You'll be like God and know both good and evil, right? In a sense, he was saying, you have the opportunity of seeing something nobody else has seen, experiencing something nobody else has experienced. And that was true. That was a very truthful statement. Satan here is, I think, almost in a sense prophetically speaking about the extremes that we just mentioned. You'll know both good and evil, the two extremes. No one else in the universe knows those two things. Not like you and I. They may have witnessed all the horrors that are going on here, but they haven't experienced it like you and I have. Nor have they understood fully the love that Jesus poured out for humanity. You and I have an opportunity to experience these things, and we will have an opportunity to be a witness of them throughout eternity to beings that have never, ever come into contact with the two extremes. You remember Ellen White's quotes, "In the mind of God, the ministry of men and women existed before the foundation of the earth." In other words, in God's mind, the ministry that you are engaged in or will be engaged in existed before you did, before the earth existed. He looked forward and he said to himself, I need a people that are like God, that have experienced good and evil, that can minister to the universe and be a witness of what I know. Do you follow? So in that sense, it is good for us to understand the two extremes. All right. Oh, yes, Monica.
I was just thinking this week, we have to fully trust him. Because yesterday I was at work and I was supposed to have an appointment at 1:30 and I said, okay, I will be finished on time for Sabbath. And then I got a call, we have to change it to 2:30. And I said, well, this is going to get very stressful and very close, And then I went to this appointment and it was over within half an hour. And I said, well, if I had just trusted the Lord more that he's working it out, I wouldn't have been so stressed out about it.
Yeah. All right, good. So the Lord reigns. Now, when it comes to creation, and we know that the creation is sustained by God. Well, let me read this. It says, creation plays a crucial role in the Psalms in upholding God's sovereignty. The heavens, which are his handiwork, proclaim his glory and power. God's name is majestic in all the earth. By the way, these are phrases that are coming right out of the Psalms, right? The Lord has created everything. He has no beginning and no end. He is everlasting and superior over the gods of all the nations, which are only the work of men's hands, nothing more. The idols have hands, but they handle not. As for the Lord, in his hand are the deep places of the earth, and his hands formed the dry land. We have this concept here that I think the psalmist is trying to get across, that God's signature is on everything. His plan can be revealed in every aspect of creation. And it's his handiwork. Why does it say his handy? What is a handiwork, by the way?
Something you have created.
Well, in Isaiah, he said he created with his hands.
Okay. So it could be literal.
It could be literal.
Okay. But when we talk about handiwork in general, we are talking about something that maybe we have created. But handiwork, in a sense, is something that I'm used to doing. It almost is dependent upon me. When, in fact, handiwork is often has its own signature, even though there's no signature on it. When I went into the Louvre in France, and there's another. It's called the Musée d'Orsay. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. It's French, you know. But Musée d'Orsay has in it a lot of different types of art. And up in the upper third story right compartment, there's a lot of Van Gogh pieces. I don't know if you guys know anything about Van Gogh. You know, he kind of does things with lines, you know, everything is a line. And you can walk in there and immediately recognize a Van Gogh. I mean, it's obvious who did it. There's no name on it, there's nothing else. All you can just look at the picture or the painting and immediately know who did it, right? And that's what this concept of handiwork. Van Gogh's handiwork. It's immediately recognizable. So God is basically saying here, when you look at creation, the world, and all that is in it, there's no one on the planet that can duplicate that stuff. You look at it and you know immediately. Only God could do that, right?
That's a big difference between evolution and creation. When you, to the tiniest animals, when you study them, the insects, the honeybee, that you know there is, God has done it and no evolution.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So the Lord created everything, but he also sustains his creation. What does that mean? It says in the Psalms that it's upholding God's sovereignty. How does God uphold it and maintain it?
Yeah, like Hebrews 1, I'm just looking at it, it's one of my favorites. It says, talking about Jesus, through whom he made the worlds, God made the worlds through Jesus, who being the brightness of his glory, the express image of his person, and upholding all things by the word of his power. That creative power of his word is what sustains, not only created everything, but sustains it, keeps it in motion.
That creative power that's armed with strength, right?
But he still keeps his power because, for example, the migrating birds, they still migrate exactly the way he taught them. They have special fly lines. So that's still maintained. He's maintaining that. He doesn't just suddenly let them fly the way they want to fly.
Right.
There's a little fact that I think defies evolution. They have ferrite particles in their brains, and they navigate by the magnetic lines of flux to the earth.
Ah,
And that's how they discern where they're going.
interesting.
And with that evolution, really.
It's like a biological GPS, right?
That's design. That's the love of God helping them.
Yeah. I had a new avionics system put into my aircraft back in September. And it's got all the flashy screens and all the cool instruments. Everything is, there's no dials anymore. Usually aircraft are full of different instruments that have dials on them, and now it's all one screen and it's all electric. And so you look at it and you go, oh man, this is so good. Everything's consolidated in a small space. I don't have to be looking at all the different instruments all the different times. And inside this box that's about this big, I saw when I went to EAA, they had the cover off. There's this tiny, tiny, tiny little chip in the upper right corner of the board. And it's got space away from, there's nothing very close to it. And of course I was thinking, I wonder why that's all out there all by itself, So I point to a guy and say, what is that? Oh, that's a special kind of chip that's capable of detecting what direction it's rotated. You can turn it around and rotate it in 3 dimensions, and it gives you the exact numerical, precise direction that you're located in 3 dimensions. Inside there, they've got this special kind of material that locks on. Once it's powered, it locks on to its current position. So when it's sitting on the runway about ready to take off, it gets initiated and it says, okay, I'm level and I'm going in this particular direction. And I know that I'm not, my bank is even. My elevation, is correct, right? What we call pitch. And my yaw is going the right direction so that it locks it in. And so when the plane takes off and it nose tips up, then it shows on my screen that the nose is going up. I want to push it down, tells me I'm going back down, and keeps it connected. That was an amazing revelation, but then they took it a little step further. They have another chip. It's on the other edge of the board called an accelerometer. The accelerometer tells you how you're accelerating in space. So like if you push the power in and really pulls back and starts to take off, it knows you're accelerating forward, right? Or if I hit the flaps and put the gear down and it slows down, right? It tells me I'm slowing down. So it's actually able to keep track now in real time where, how quickly I'm moving through space in any direction. Then they couple that with a GPS chip. The GPS obviously does what your phone does, connects up into space, and now tells you where you are. So now you know where you are, how fast you're going, and in what direction in 3D space. And it all gets fed into the computer and displays on the screen so that you're able to see it in real time. And we think to ourselves, that is just amazing technology. I mean, it's worth a bundle. And trust me, I paid a bundle for it, right? And all of that is in one of those Canadian gooses. It doesn't cost nearly as much, and it's probably a lot more accurate. They know just where to go.
Yeah, that prevents spatial disorientation.
There you go. There you go. So next time you hear that honking that's flying over, you'll know. God's handiwork at work, right? All right. The Monday lesson says the Lord reigns. Closely tied, in fact, inseparably tied to the Lord as creator is the Lord as sovereign, as ruler. The declaration, the Lord reigneth, is solemnly proclaimed in Psalms 93:1, Psalms 96:10, and Psalms 97:1, and Psalms 99:1. Notice it's a lot of ones, but his echoes are heard throughout the book of Psalms. The Lord is clothed with honor, majesty, and strength. He is surrounded with clouds and darkness, but also covers himself with light as with a garment. And David and I were just talking about this morning. How did Adam and Eve know that they were naked when they sinned in the garden? You notice that they were ashamed, because Adam said we were ashamed, right? And so we went to hide because he said we were naked. And God asked them the question, who told you were naked? Who did tell them they were naked?
Because the light disappeared. They were different.
Clothing disappeared.
Something had happened. You said their light had disappeared.
They had a certain light around them that disappeared. It was a spiritual robe.
Yes, Ellen White tells us that there was a robe of light that was around them that had maybe disappeared. We surely don't experience that. I don't get up in the morning and say to myself, I don't need to put these clothes on because I have my robe of light, right? We don't experience that. But Adam and Eve apparently did. And they noticed when it was gone. Why did God ask them who told them they were naked? He is trying to solicit a comprehension about what took place. Why do they know that they're naked? Why is he purposefully asking that question?
Because Satan said, when you eat this, then you will know good and evil. So it brings the understanding you did something and now you're different.
Ah. Suddenly they became aware of the contrast of the good and evil. They may not have been aware of that before, right?
Because there was none.
In other words, there was some naivete that was there before, and suddenly there wasn't. They weren't naive anymore.
There was no contrast before.
Yeah, there was no contrast. Very good point. So, see, this is almost in a sense what all the beings out there throughout the creation, that's what they experience. They don't experience these contrasts like we do. The good and the evil, the light and the darkness, the up and the down. I don't know, maybe they have that. But you get my point. Adam and Eve suddenly began to distinguish between these two polar opposites, these two extremes. They hadn't been told that they were naked. There's no recording of that. But they were suddenly aware of it, right? But what we do know is that this light that surrounded them, that they were clothed with, is indicative of the image in which they were made. What is that image that they were made? It says here that he surrounds himself. This is talking about God. He is surrounded with clouds and darkness, but also covers himself with light as with a garment. And Adam and Eve were made in the image of God. So they too were clothed in this light.
The righteousness of Christ was clothing. They were enveloped in it.
Yeah.
It was part of who they were
Mm-hmm.
until they lost it.
And suddenly it was missing.
Yeah, this is maybe exactly why we really don't know exactly what God Father looks like and what form he has. We only know Jesus because he took out our form. So
Yeah.
The Father dwells in light unapproachable. No
Yeah.
man can see God and live. I mean, he is enveloped in light, and we would be extinguished if we saw him.
Yeah. And it says here that he surrounds himself with clouds and darkness.
To protect us,
Okay.
because we couldn't exist.
Okay. All right. Good stuff. Now, when it says here that the Lord as creator, why does the lesson say as creator, the Lord is sovereign, right? As ruler. The declaration, the Lord reigneth, is solemnly proclaimed, but its echoes are heard throughout the book of Psalms. The Lord is clothed with honor, majesty, strength. He's surrounded with clouds and darkness, but he also covers himself with light. It says these metaphors exalt the king's power and splendor and are carefully chosen to express God's unique greatness, which is beyond human comprehension. So it's not just that he's so bright that I wouldn't be able to exist if I saw him, that he covers himself with clouds and darkness. I don't know about you, but I don't go out and look at the sun. I might glance at it quickly and, turn away or see it out of my peripheral vision. I know what it looks like, but I don't look at it directly. Why? Yeah, it's so bright that it's too much for me to handle, right? There's something about the sun that I want to look at. I'm kind of attracted to it in a way. I was just thinking yesterday when I was going into the hospital at Wake Med has these mirror-like windows. And the sun was going down in the west, if you will. And as I was walking towards the building, the windows reflected that sun. And all of a sudden, I just felt this warmth that just kind of came over me. It was kind of brisk out yesterday. And this warmth came over me. And of course, I looked up into the windows, and it was just blinding, just the reflection. And I thought to myself, that warmth was so nice. It's attractive. I almost kind of wanted to stop and just soak it all in, We have an attraction to this, just like we have an attraction to God. We want to look, and yet we're not so sure we should. Why is it that we're drawn to look at God, but not exactly at him? We have deference, we turn away because it's too much. And yet we're drawn to him.
He's put that in all of his creation. We're dependent upon him. Whether we know it or remember it or think of it or cognizant of it, we are dependent upon him, and he puts something in us that draws us to look and worship and adore and appreciate, even if we don't yet know him.
Even if we can't stand to just fully look straight on.
Right? It's like you appreciate the sunlight, but you can't look into it.
Yeah. I noticed the same thing with my dog, Matcha. She has this routine. Every morning, Lynn gets up about a half an hour, 45 minutes before me, and she goes and does a little workout. And then she comes through the bedroom door, she opens the door, and Matcha runs, jumps up on the bed, comes over, lays down kind of on me, and then kind of looks up at me like, pet me, pet me, pet me, pet me. And so I pet her. And I talk to her for, 5-10 minutes. It just depends on how much she wants to soak up. But I notice that when I make eye contact with her, she looks away. And then if I look away, then she'll come right back and look at me. And then if I look back at her, she looks away again. Like, what is that dynamic? She doesn't know God. I might be probably the closest representative. But she's wired in a way that's very similar to how I'm wired in my connection with God.
She wants your approval and your affection, but she's awed by you.
Yeah. And looking at me directly, she thinks might be a challenge. And so she looks away.
That's the dog world. They can't challenge the alpha.
Yeah. And there's a lesson right there. There's a lesson right there. I go to the Lord and I say, help me, I need. I can't take this. Help me. You got to strengthen me, blah, blah, blah. And I do all of my things like what she does at the table. She comes over and she just looks at me.
Those eyes.
She's got these seal eyes. I don't know if you guys have seen my dog, some of you that have. She's got these puppy seal eyes, where she just looks at you and just like, and you melt when you see her. Because she's just, so cute.
There's a smile on her face. It's eagerness in her face.
Yeah. But particularly if I'm at the table, and she's down there looking at me, and she'll be watching everything I'm putting in my mouth. And of course, if I look at her, she's like, like, I'm not really begging. I'm just kind of here, right?
Even the dogs eat the scraps that fall from the master's table.
Yeah. There are some analogies here. You can see right in nature his handiwork, his blueprint. We can see in the animal kingdom the very type of situation that God has between him and us. We can observe it right there. And it should be obvious. Nobody taught her how to do that. And every dog works almost exactly the same way. They're just wired that way. And there's a reason. And there's a lesson in it. Father in heaven, we want to thank you that you reign. We want to thank you that you are in control of all things. We want to thank you for the lessons that you have given us in nature that remind us that we belong to you, that we reap the crumbs that fall from the master's table, that you are ultimately in control, even though the waves come and they hit us and they seem to want to swallow us up. You are the one that keep us steady and firm. Lord, we pray that as we continue in this lifetime, that you would make us humble servants, that we would be willing and continue to be willing to be your servants, to be of service to those around us. And I pray, Lord, also that you would lift us up, that you would keep us steady, that we would know who is in control, who is sovereign. In thy precious name, amen.